If your New Year's resolution was to get healthy, release weight, or clean up your eating habits, but you're still struggling to get and stay on track, don't worry. You're not alone, and I have just the thing for you. I'm kicking off a free 5-day Break Up with Sugar challenge on February 17th. This is a live 5-day challenge where I will coach you through my exact method to start releasing weight, get rid of the belly bloat, skyrocket your energy, and most importantly, get that sugar dragon off your back for good. You will not believe what can happen in just 5 short days. It's a total reboot for your taste buds so you can take back control over your cravings instead of feeling like your cravings are controlling you. You can sign up for the free Break Up with Sugar challenge at sarahhaaswellness.com or on the link in the podcast show notes below. You deserve to look and feel light and amazing. And did I mention it's totally free? We start February 17th, and I hope to see you there. Welcome, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Boss Body Podcast, where we empower busy women in midlife, menopause, and beyond with the tools they need to release weight, physical, mental, and emotional, to create the vibrant, healthy life they deserve. If you're successful in so many areas of your life, but you struggle to give yourself the same love and care you offer everyone else, you've found your community. I'm your host, Sarah Haas, women's weight release and body love coach, and I'm here to help you age radiantly, feel good in your body, and live a joyful, energized life now and for decades to come. Hi, welcome everybody. This is Sarah Haas, and you're listening to the Boss Body Podcast. Thanks so much for being here. I'm really excited about today's episode. I have a good friend and a colleague on, Elizabeth Barbour, and she has her master's in counseling. She's also a life and business coach and a shamanic practitioner. And what I really asked her to come on today and talk about is she has written this amazing book called Sacred Celebrations: Designing Rituals to Navigate Life's Milestone Transitions. And I just thought, wow, we don't talk about rituals that much. Like, to me, a ritual is maybe a wedding or a funeral. And I know for myself, I do a ritual around New Year's, a releasing of the past and manifestation for the future. And then of course there's birthday parties, but she goes a little deeper. And I want to have her talk about that, the significance of these rituals and how they can really help you navigate through transitions. So Elizabeth, thank you. I'm so happy you're here today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Sarah. I'm excited to have this conversation. I appreciate what you said about that. Yeah, I go a little bit deeper, and that's what I love. And I know you're going to ask me a bunch of questions, but that's what I love about this concept is people are very familiar with, as you said, sort of weddings and funerals and birthdays. But when we start to really dig a little bit deeper and go a little bit wider, they, oh yeah, we could do this and we could do that. What about this? So it gets exciting and it's fun actually. So
Yeah, and you actually work with groups and individuals to create these individualized rituals for different different life transitions that they are going through. So tell me a little bit about just the background. Like, how did you
sure.
get this idea? And then I really want to hear more about what a ritual is and
Okay.
why this is so helpful. But first, just a little background on, what
Okay.
even gave you this idea and eventually led you to write the book.
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. So there's actually two stories that I'll share. The first was back when I initially became a coach. So I started my coaching, life and business coaching business back in the year 2000. So I was one of the early adopters of the profession. Back in the days when you told people you were a coach and they said, what sport, what sport, and I was like, no, no, I know I'm not athletic. And one of my very first clients was a woman who was in a really major life transition. She and her husband had wanted desperately to have children and were unable to. And we were working together. She actually hired me to work on some career transition that she was working through. But as we were talking about the career stuff, this whole concept of family and sort of the vision for the future came up. And they had come to the decision that they were going to stop trying to have children, and they were going to make peace with that. And they explored, do we want to adopt, do we want to foster, whatever. And they finally came to that place of clarity of, you know what, we're just going to be at peace and choose to have a child-free life. And in that coaching session, I'll never forget it, and it's 25 years ago now. She said, I said, well, what if you were to create a ritual? What if you were to create a ritual to honor that decision and that sort of that demarcation point? And she was like, oh, that's a great idea. And so just together in our coaching sessions, we co-created this ritual for her. And then she invited, I don't know, 8 or 10 of her closest women friends. And they designed this whole ritual to help her really embrace the ending of this one chapter and the beginning of the next. And so I didn't know at the time that ritual was going to become like my thing, sort of my area of expertise. But it was just such a natural event. And then soon after that, actually, I was going through a divorce and I had a friend and she said, well, what's your divorce ritual going to be? And I was like, well, why would I do that? So it's so funny because I had just coached this other client and then my friend was coaching me going, well, of course you have to have a divorce ritual. So I ended up having a divorce ritual. So, fast forward then to that would have been around the year 2000. I've been coaching for 24, 25 years now. And back in 2016, my mother was dying, my adoptive mom. And she was having a hard time with letting go of her earthly body. She had had cancer, had fought it for many years, and it returned. And she was really struggling with this. And at the time, I was working with a shamanic practitioner, and she suggested that we do a series of white rose releases, which I end up writing about in the book. You may recall that. And so, in doing that work with prayer work and meditation and intention with my mom and the flowers and water, there were a couple rose releases in the water. It helped mom and me to process our emotions and our feelings and just everything about her leaving me, leaving Earth, leaving all the people who loved her. So when she did eventually pass, that she died on September 11th, 2016. And just a few days later, I was going to bury her in Florida. So we were living in Houston at the time. I was going to bury her in Florida where my dad had died and been buried many, many years prior. And one of my girlfriends said, but Elizabeth, you need to do something here in Houston. And I said, well, my mom didn't really know that many people. She just moved here because I was taking care of her. And my friend said, no, they want to show up for you. So I created this, what I opened the book with. It's the White Rose Release Ceremony. And I had about 30 or 35 women from all different aspects of my life. I had neighbors and Zumba buddies and clients and friends. And they came to my home and we did this beautiful ritual with white roses. And we talked not only about my mother, and of course that was, a central part of it, but it wasn't the only part. We talked about the importance of women and family and mothers and mothering. So we weren't just talking about moms, we were talking about aunties and grandmothers and sisters and best girlfriends and how critical all of those friendships and connections and family relationships are for all of us. And it was just a whole beautiful day of ceremony. And afterwards, I had several people say that was the most incredible funeral or memorial service that we've ever been to, because it wasn't just about mom and it wasn't just about me. It was about all of us and the collective experiences that we have together. And so it was soon after that that I knew, okay, I have to write this book. I have to teach other people how to create their own rituals that are meaningful and have depth to
I
them.
love
So
that. That's just such a beautiful, powerful story. And I think a lot of us do think of a funeral as a ritual. It's honoring the person and their life. And then also it helps us to accept that they're gone. I think a lot of times that's why a lot of people prefer an open casket just so it's looks real to them. I know that's not everybody, but that's just an example. And a lot of different cultures do the death ritual different ways. But I loved
yes.
what you said about this. You're going to have a memorial ceremony for your mom, but your friends in Texas, where you were, wanted to have a ceremony not just to honor your mom, but to honor you and you having to let go of your mom. And then the idea that you brought in the feminine connections because a lot of times, the mom is the matriarch, and then there's daughters and then granddaughters, and the whole family is so interconnected, and who you are is so connected to who she was. And so it was not only powerful for you, it was powerful for all the other women who were there.
Yeah, it was. And what was really neat was having people share stories too about their own mothers. And, what are the things that they learned from them? And, it was everything from, I learned how to cook to, I learned that I should wear lipstick every time I leave the house to, I learned how to, be a good listener and kind and caring and, all of that. And so, as I invited people to share stories, they were connecting with their own moms, many of whom were still living, but many who had also passed on as well. So it's a way to honor and remember our ancestors as well as those who are still with us.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking when you were talking about it. It really opens you up to what other things that need to come into the conversation for
Yeah.
you and for the people there. Because I'm sure going into it, you didn't really realize what that would create, that container of having this ritual that day.
Mhm.
And then it brought in so much richness and beauty.
Well, and one thing you just said reminded me of this is that because her more formal funeral, more traditional funeral took place in Florida a few weeks later, by doing the White Rose release ceremony in Houston, almost immediately, it's probably 5 days after she died. Um, it helped me to process and to get grounded and get prepared because then not only did we have to deal with you have to deal with cremation and all that entails and for anyone who's lost a loved one there's so much the day to day still has to happen, but then I was also planning this event in another state several weeks away, and that was stressful too. So it was like doing the event in Houston allowed me to get centered in my body and get aligned so that then when I showed up in Florida a few weeks later, I was ready to go. Because that's when there was a lot of family and there were a lot of mom's friends and and she had lived in Florida for 20 years. So that was really her home base. So
Yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense because
yeah.
it allowed you to center yourself in the midst of all of the stress and chaos, which death for the loved ones, there's a lot of work involved.
Yeah.
Physical work and mental and emotional. So it sounds like that really helped you
Hmm.
move through some of that so that you could handle the other
Yes.
aspects that were to come. So, what are
Yes.
some of the other life transitions that you help people with? Because I know it's not just death.
Right.
And you mentioned, you mentioned another example earlier, but can you give us a few more examples of things that you would do a ritual for?
Sure, absolutely. So in my book, Sacred Celebrations, I can hold it up here? Here it is.
Absolutely.
I
People
just
who are watching on video can see it. If you're listening, it's a gorgeous book, and I'm going to give you the information how you can look this book up. But it's a beautiful cover with a circle of women holding hands.
Yeah,
Yes,
underneath the moon and the stars, which is what I
beautiful.
love. That the graphic designer, she did such an amazing job with this. But so as I talk about in the book, I have probably, I don't know, about a dozen chapters or so. So we talk about some really major life rituals. Obviously, weddings, birthdays, funerals. We've talked about that. We talk about moving, doing a house blessing ceremony when you're saying goodbye to your home or saying hello to your new home. Divorce, we mentioned that earlier, but I think it's so important, especially in this day and age when like 50% of marriages end in divorce, for people, men and women, to do some kind of a divorce ritual, to really honor their endings and then celebrate the new beginnings.
I like that idea because I'm divorced as well. And after my divorce, I did smudging throughout my house. So I took a smudge stick and went through the house, and I was just sort of, because it was this, I'm living in the same home, but I
Mhm.
wanted to change the mojo, reclaim it for me. And there could have been more to the ritual, but I didn't really have the wherewithal. That was just mainly focused around my home. But I
Yes.
think it's a really cool idea to do a ritual just around the idea of divorce, because you hear about divorce all the time. Because, like you said, 50% of marriages. But unless you've gone through it, you don't realize how hard it is. It's
Right.
not just a quick, it goes on, it can go on for years leading up to the decision to have a divorce and then actually going through it's very, very traumatic. And if you have kids, letting go of being with your kids on holidays and every day, and just there's so much transition involved. You just don't really realize the magnitude of it. And those who are listening who have been through a divorce, I'm sure can relate to what I'm saying. But what kind of ritual would you do for a divorce? Just give me, what do rituals look like?
Sure, sure. I actually have a couple examples. So interesting that you used the smudging, which is a wonderful way to, clear the energy. And I love how you said change the mojo. I wasn't living in the same home when I got divorced many years ago, but I had the same furniture. And so I write about in the book how I actually beat my furniture with a tennis racket because I wanted to get all of the, negative, all I wanted to shift from, we to me and get the energy. And, at the time I was young and, I couldn't really afford to go buy new furniture. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to, beat the crap out of it with my tennis racket. Um, yeah, and actually, so it's interesting when I had my book launch party last year, and I write all about my divorce rituals. I actually had three different divorce rituals, um, and but someone came to my book launch last year, and she was a friend of a friend actually, and she said, "Oh, she said, I heard that you have this section about divorce rituals. Let me tell you about mine." And I was like, "Ooh, what'd you do?" She went with her bridesmaids, and they all put on their dresses. So she put on her wedding dress, and her bridesmaids put on their bridesmaids dresses. They went to the church where she got married, and they all walked out of there backwards.
Wow, that is something.
I was like, whoa, that is really powerful. And then, I'm sure they had food and drinks and, whatever. I'm sure there was some other element to it, but I thought that was really, really powerful. Um, Another thing that I did during my divorce, I invited some girlfriends to come to my house. So my ex-husband and he was living in another state. He was out in Seattle, Washington, and I was in Asheville, North Carolina. So when he called me to let me know that, he had gone to court and everything was finalized, I had invited my girlfriends to come over to my house and just be with me. And I asked them, I said, just bring something that's going to make me feel better. And I didn't specify it or anything. And individually, they all brought different things. One brought a little plant to represent new life and new chapters. Another one brought some really sweet poetry about being strong and brave and, embracing this new chapter of my life. Another one brought a single girl's survival kit, and it had, like lip balm and condoms. And, I don't even remember all the other things that were in it, but it was really cute. And then what I did was I actually scheduled a phone call with him that night. And we talked on the phone, and I had sent him a couple questions ahead of time. Things like, what did you love the most about our marriage? And what are your favorite memories of our time together? And what do you wish for me and my future? And then what do I wish for him and his future? And we had this really, really sweet conversation. And the way the timing worked out, he actually called right when the girlfriends were there. And so, I didn't speak to him for long, maybe 15 minutes. But it was just enough to get that closure, and then kind of fell into the arms of the girlfriends, which was really special. So,
Two things have struck me about some of these examples you've given me. And one is that a lot of times, and I know for me, this is true, anytime I've gone through something difficult, like the death of my father who died of cancer, my divorce, I kind of want to just move on. I kind of want to just say, okay, that's over. I got through it. Let's just move on. And everybody processes their emotions in their own time. But I think having the ritual really puts you in that place of allowing those emotions to come up. So you're getting the support of your girlfriends, but then you're also reminiscing with your ex-husband about the good, the bad. And that's tough, but that's also sounds very cleansing. Like you're really allowing yourself that space to let all that emotion come up.
and I love how you just said that you're allowing, and it's even giving yourself permission to create that space for the things to come up. Because you're right, Sarah, we do live in a society where it's like, okay, did that, let's move on to the next thing and let's just get on with it. But when we take the time for the pause, when we take the time to be fully present, when we take that time to sort of rest at the threshold, if you will, think about, you're going from one life experience to then another, but there's a threshold in between that. So it's like the ritual is that sacred container to stand on that threshold, to look behind you and go, oh wow, what was? And then to look ahead and say, oh well, what's coming now? And I'll share one other thing too, is though, so I've actually been divorced twice. And my second divorce from my husband, Eric, was just 3 years ago. And we are still very actively co-parenting our daughter. We spend holidays and vacations together. We still do a lot of things as a family. And so we have a wonderful relationship, which is very different from my first husband, who I haven't spoken to in over a decade. So one of our rituals that we do, and especially with our daughter, what we've done is we've shifted our wedding anniversary to now be what we call our family anniversary. Because the day he and I got married was really the beginning of our family. And then, of course, our daughter joined us, a few years later. And so every year on October 23rd, the three of us go to dinner and we have our family anniversary celebration. Um, so it's just a positive way to spend that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that idea. But the other thing that really comes up for me when you're talking is this takes a lot of courage. It's really brave to do these things so soon when they're happening, like right after your mother died, right after your divorce became final. And I personally don't know if I would be able to go there that soon when
Mhm.
everything's so raw. I agree 100%. There needs to be a pause. It's just like when people get married, they do the ritual of the father walking the bride down the aisle and her saying goodbye to her past as, being home with her parents or whatever and moving into her new life now with her husband. And it's it's a beautiful pause really between
Mhm.
single and married.
Mhm.
But the things you're talking about are extremely powerful
Mhm.
and vulnerable and painful.
Yes. Yes, and I hear what you say about the courage, and I think I want to remind listeners that it's not really a matter of when you do things or even exactly what you do. It's just that you do something at some point. Because I think that, we all process differently. I'm someone who is, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I share my life experience very openly. And I think that I'm someone who's like, okay, I've got this thing and I'm going to do it and let's just do it all the way. And other people need a little more time to sit back and rest and reflect. Think about going back to death, because, that's the universal experience, right? That we're all going to have at some point, is losing a loved one. Some traditions, especially some faith traditions, you have to bury somebody within a matter of days. It could be 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever. But in other traditions, especially when people are cremated, it might be weeks or even months before there's some kind of a memorial honoring. And that's okay too, because there's all these steps and stages along the way. And so you might not have been ready to really dive deep into the emotions of the loss right away. But in 3 months or 6 months, you might be more fully able to really embrace that. Plus, it also allows people to come together too. You can't always mobilize your loved ones in a 5 day period, to all get together, especially if you live all over the country. But when you can plan something and be very intentional with that, it can be really powerful.
I agree. I agree. So tell me about some of the other transitions that
Yeah, I
you
wanted
recommend doing rituals around.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we talked about a couple others. Certainly business and career transitions. Maybe you have changed jobs, maybe you've retired, um, maybe you've completely shifted careers. Maybe you go back to school midlife and you get a new degree and you start on a whole new thing. I
Empty
think there's
nesting.
yeah, empty nesting. Yes, for sure. I think empty nesting is actually a really big one. And then also health challenges. I think that when we are faced with health challenges, it can be really powerful to do rituals. What I write about it in the book, so I have a whole chapter on health rituals, but one of my best friends had a hysterectomy several years ago because she had a cancer diagnosis. And she asked her friend group, me included, and she said, hi, and I have my kitty cat on my lap. This is Coco. For those of you who are watching, this is Coco. She just came up.
I'm a
Interesting.
cat
She came.
person too, so I can appreciate that.
Okay. Well, interesting. She came up when I was talking about this health stuff. Really interesting. Um, so my girlfriend, she was having this emergency hysterectomy. So she asked our group of friends if we would do sort of like an emergency, like a prayer ritual for her in helping her get ready and giving her strength and courage to undergo the surgery. And coincidentally, I ended up having to have a hysterectomy just about 4 months after she did. And, we've been friends for 30 years. And so I then did the same thing with the same group of friends. I said, okay, y'all did it for her. Will you please do it for me? And we just had this sweet little, it was on Zoom because people were all over the place. And, but just have a little prayer circle to come together. So I think whenever we are faced with health challenges, to do some kind of intentional ritual, whether it's with your family or yourself or just your partner or your best friend or a group of friends. I think that can really help because, it's scary when you're facing, a cancer diagnosis or having to have surgery or, whatever.
Oh, believe me, I can relate 100%. My listeners know that I went through breast cancer and treatments for a couple of years. And one of the things that I did, well, I've done several rituals. The first one was when I was having my mastectomy. In
Mhm.
preparing for the mastectomy, I wrote a farewell letter to my boobs. That's what I called
Yes.
it. And I
Yes.
sat with it. I'm going to get emotional talking about it. I
Oh,
sat with it, because it was a big loss, a big emotional
sure.
loss. And your breasts represent so much. And so
Yes.
my letter talked about my growing up, going through puberty, nursing my babies, you
Mm.
know, my sexuality, a lot of different things. And I actually posted it on my website. So if anybody wants to go back, I know it's been helpful to a lot of women who have also undergone mastectomies, but it really just helped me say goodbye.
Mm.
The other thing I did was while I was going through cancer, I kept seeing feathers everywhere. Feathers kept, and also it started during my divorce, the feathers. It was funny when I was literally walking into the courthouse, there was a beautiful white feather on the doorstep right before I walked in.
Oh,
And feathers kept coming to me, and to me, it was my higher power. It was the angels sending me a
wow.
signal that I'm going to be okay, that I'm being watched over, I'm being protected, I'm loved. And when I was going through cancer, same thing, feathers everywhere. The day of my first chemotherapy appointment, this is a good story and a sad story. I walked into my garage to get in my car to go to chemotherapy, and my cats had apparently gotten a bird,
Oh,
but there was nothing left of it there but feathers. So there were hundreds of feathers scattered all over my garage when I was going to get into my car. And I said, "Thank you, little bird, for sacrificing your life so that I would know that I'm going to be okay." And so on my 2-year anniversary of being cancer free, I got a tattoo of a feather on my wrist, and I wanted it somewhere where I would see it so it could constantly remind me. And I just had my 5-year all clear scan, which is huge. And so
congratulations.
you're really reminding me that I need to honor that with that's definitely a huge step. It's a huge transition. And anybody who's dealt with an illness or cancer or who is dealing with it knows that it's really hard to let it go. It's a lot of fear that's constantly in your mind. What's going to happen to me? What if it comes back? And I think a ritual, regardless of your situation, can help you start releasing that and seeing the bigger picture of I am safe, I am protected, I am going to be okay regardless of the outcome. I
I
had no
love.
idea we were going to talk about all this in this conversation, but just, you and I have had a lot in common of having to
Yeah.
go through illness and surgeries and I'm so glad you brought this up today. I love the things that you've been sharing, and I know that the listeners probably ideas have come into their heads about other life transitions, maybe some that we haven't even spoken about that
Hmm.
I hope this will give them an idea that, hey, maybe I should honor this, not just honor it, but take that pause, like you said, take that pause and allow those emotions to flow because that's a big part of moving on. And
It
so I want
is.
to mention the name of your book again. It's called Sacred Celebrations, Designing Rituals to Navigate Life's Milestone Transitions. And I'm going to be sure to put a link so anyone who's interested in getting the book will be able to do that. I also wanted to mention that we'll have to do a whole nother podcast on this, but she also wrote a book called Smart Self-Care, 20
Mhm.
Lessons to Find the Me Time You Keep Putting Off, which I know is a huge issue for a lot of my listeners, myself included. We like to
We
put
all put
everybody
it off.
first. Yes. And Elizabeth also has a download for anybody that's listening, completely free called Seven Daily Rituals for Self-Care, Sanity, and Success. So I'm going to put the link to all of these things. And I just want to thank you so much. This is just beautiful. I love that you're bringing this into the world. And I think that it's so beneficial for so many. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sarah, and thank you for sharing some of your personal rituals, especially for your listeners, who've been with you for a long time and, they've seen the arc and how, we can just incorporate rituals in every aspects of our lives and it just helps things be richer. So I look forward to hearing about your 5-year no evidence of disease celebration.
I
So,
will
and if,
definitely keep in
yeah,
touch about that.
yeah, let us know.
So thank you everybody for listening. I appreciate you being here as always, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here. I'm honored that you've chosen to spend your time with me and allowed me to be part of your journey. In case you need to hear this, you are enough. You're smart enough. You're successful enough. You're beautiful enough. You're important enough. You are enough right now, just as you are. You were enough yesterday. You'll be enough tomorrow. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and share it with the amazing women in your life who could use a little extra love and support. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.